Hello. So moving on from fractions and decimals, we come to percentages, which is just another way of recording the same information. It's just this is only seen as a fraction out of 100. Percent, as you know, means out of 100. So what we're looking at is a fraction out of 100. So it makes it a bit more straightforward, I suppose. You can have percentages of all sorts of things. I give you a percentage when you do a maths test or any exam you do. You'll get a percentage at the end of it, and it will give you your score as if you've done it out of 100. Now we're going to be looking at finding percentages of amounts today. You have all done this before. You needed to do this for your level 6 tables, and I think some of your level 7 as well. So I know that you can all do this. We'll be looking at finding 10% of an amount. And if you can find 10% of an amount, you can also find 5%, 20%, 50%, because all you have to do, you find 10% first, and then if you want to make it 5%, you're going to half that amount. If you want to make it 20%, you're going to double it. I'll explain that a bit more slowly now. Okay, so let's remind ourselves of how we find 10% of something. If your number finishes in a 0, it's really easy. So if we had to find 10% of 40, all we're going to do is divide it by 10. Okay, 10 because 10%. If we go back to our 100 square, each percent is one tiny square on that grid. 10% is going to be one strip of that grid, isn't it? Like we were talking about last week with the decimals. So 10% is a tenth. 10 out of 100 is 1/10. So we're finding a tenth of that number. So 10% of 40 is 40 divided by 10. So that makes 4. Okay, so if we had 10% of 70, we just divide that by 10, and that makes 7. Okay, I'll just put 10%. Okay, if we wanted to find 10% of 250, again, we're dividing by 10, so it is 25. Okay, now, if we wanted to find 5%, all you're going to do is find 10% of the number and half your answer. Okay, so if you're finding 5% of a number, so 5% of 40, so to find 5% of 40, first of all we find 10%, so we divide it by 10, which is 4, and then we half it. So 5% of 40 equals 2. Okay, if we're finding 5% of 25 metres, okay, that's a bit more tricky. You need to find 10% first, so 10% of 25 is 2.5. You need to half 2.5. We need to do that sum there, 25 divided by 2, 2.5 divided by 2. So half of 2.5 is 1.25. So it would be 1.25 metres. Okay. So to find 5% of something, you first of all need to find 10% by dividing the amount by 10, and then you half your answer. If you wanted to find 20% of something, then you find 10% first, and you times it by 2. Okay, so if we wanted to find 20% of 25 metres, 20% of 25 metres, remember 10% was 2.5, times it by 2, and that equals 5. Now some of you may have spotted that you could just divide it by 5 in the first place, because you may have realised that 20 out of 100 can be simplified to a fifth. So 20% is the same as a fifth. Okay, now if you can't remember that, That doesn't matter, because you don't need to remember that at this stage. You just need to remember how to find 10%, and then you know that you double it to find 20%. And if you want to find 30%, you do exactly the same thing. You find 10%, and then you times it by 3. 40%, you're going to times it by 4, and so on. So for today, your task today is to you get this book. Okay, your Maths on Target book year 5. Turn to page 87, and I want you to do B. Okay, you don't need to do A. You start with B. Okay, that's 14 questions. 14. It's 15 questions, but they've got 2 number 14s. Bit of a typo there. So it's 15 questions. If you're feeling particularly on it this morning and you want to have a go at doing C, you can, but please don't spend more than 40 minutes doing all of this. Okay, so you can do C if you're desperate to, but you don't have to. You need to think a bit more carefully if you get onto C, but I'm perfectly happy if you just do B. If you've got any questions, please come to the Zoom session at 10:45. Okay, if not, then just do the work in your maths book, take a photo or a scan of it and send it to me on Shobi. Okay, be brilliant. I'll see some of you at the Zoom session.